The Korean peninsula, nestled between towering mountains and lush valleys, lay the ancient kingdom of Sila. This land, known for its beauty and prosperity, was ruled by a king whose wisdom and strength were renowned throughout the region. King Seon, as he was known, had led his people through years of peace, his name whispered with reverence by all who lived under his rule. The kingdom was a place of harmony, where the cherry blossoms bloomed in spring and the golden rice fields stretched endlessly under the summer sun. The villagers lived simple, contented lives, their days filled with the rhythms of farming, crafting, and raising families. In the capital, artisans created delicate pottery, silk garments, and intricate carvings, while scholars studied ancient texts, preserving the knowledge of their ancestors. But beneath the surface of this idyllic life, a shadow was brewing. King Seon, though outwardly strong and confident, was troubled by a deep fear that gnawed at the edges of his mind. He had heard whispers, rumors of an ancient prophecy that foretold the end of his reign. The prophecy spoke of a child, not yet born, who would rise and bring about the fall of the king. One fateful evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and red, King Seon summoned his most trusted advisor, the High Priestess May. The priestess was a woman of great wisdom, her knowledge of the spiritual world unmatched. Her long, flowing robe shimmered in the dim light of the torches that lined the king's chamber. "High Priestess," the king began, his voice heavy with the weight of his fears, "I have heard disturbing tales of a prophecy that speaks of my downfall. Is there truth to these rumors?" The High Priestess bowed her head, her expression somber. "Your Majesty, the prophecy you speak of is indeed ancient. It has been passed down through generations, whispered among the wise and the learned. It is said that a child will be born, a child who will grow to challenge your reign and bring about a new era in Silla." King Seon's face hardened, his eyes narrowing. "And what can be done to prevent this?" he demanded. "How can I protect my kingdom from this threat?" The High Priestess hesitated, her gaze lowering to the floor. "There is only one way, my king," she replied softly. "The prophecy cannot be undone, but it can be delayed. If you were to leave the throne, the child would have no cause to rise against you. The prophecy would be rendered moot, and the kingdom would be spared." The king's eyes blazed with anger. "Leave the throne," he thundered. "I have ruled this land for decades. I have brought prosperity and peace to my people, and now you suggest I abandon my throne to avoid a mere child?" The High Priestess remained silent, knowing that further words would only fan the flames of the king's fury. She could see the storm brewing within him, the pride and fear warring in his heart. "Very well," King Seon said, his voice low and dangerous. "If a child is to be my undoing, then I shall ensure that no such child is ever born. I will decree that all male infants in the kingdom are to be slain from the moment they draw their first breath." The High Priestess gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Your Majesty, you cannot." "I can, and I will," the king interrupted, his eyes cold and unyielding. "I will not allow my reign to be ended by some nameless child. Let the prophecy be thwarted before it begins." And so, with a heavy heart and a mind clouded by fear and pride, King Seon set in motion a decree that would bring great sorrow to his land. The royal guards were dispatched to every village, every town, with orders to seek out and destroy any male child born in the kingdom. But unbeknownst to the king, fate had already begun to weave its intricate web. In a small, secluded village, far from the prying eyes of the king's guards, a child was born. This child, destined to change the course of history, would be hidden and raised in secret, growing up within the very walls of the king's palace. As the years passed, the kingdom of Silla would come to know that no man, not even a king, could escape his destiny. The decree was swift and brutal. The king's words spread like wildfire across the kingdom, carried by messengers who rode day and night to deliver the orders. In every village, from the bustling market squares to the quiet countryside, the people were gripped by fear. Mothers clutched their newborn sons to their chests, their hearts heavy with dread, while fathers gathered in secret, their faces etched with anger and despair. In the capital, the king's palace, once a place of grandeur and peace, became a fortress of tension. King Seon's decision had sent shockwaves through his court. Even his closest advisors whispered among themselves, questioning the king's judgment. But none dared to speak openly against him, for they knew that the king's wrath was as swift as it was deadly. Within the palace, the high priestess May retreated to her sanctuary, her heart heavy with sorrow. She had foreseen the king's reaction, but had hoped, in vain, that he might see reason. Now, she could only pray for the innocent lives that would be lost and for the soul of the king, who had chosen a path that would lead to his own destruction. The massacre began at dawn. The king's soldiers, armed with swords and spears, descended upon the villages like a dark cloud. They moved with grim efficiency, knocking on doors, searching homes, and dragging infants from their mothers' arms. The cries of women echoed through the streets, mingling with the cold commands of the soldiers. The air was thick with the smell of fear and death. In the village of Hanol, nestled deep within the mountains, a young woman named Seon cradled her newborn son in her arms. Her husband, Jin-won, stood by the door, his face pale and drawn. They had heard the rumors, the whispers of the king's decree, but had prayed that their remote village might be spared. Now, as the sound of approaching soldiers reached their ears, they knew their prayers had gone unanswered. "We must hide him," Seon whispered, her voice trembling. Jin-won nodded, his mind racing. He had prepared for this moment, though he had hoped it would never come. He led Seon to the small trapdoor hidden beneath the floorboards of their home. It led to a tiny, cramped space, barely large enough to hold a person. He had dug it himself, late at night, when the village slept, fearing that the day might come when they would need such a hiding place. "Hurry," he urged, helping Seon into the narrow space. She clutched their son tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. As she settled into the darkness, Jin-won knelt beside her, his eyes filled with pain. "Stay here," he whispered. "No matter what happens, do not come out until it's safe." Seon nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Be careful," she murmured, her voice choked with emotion. Jin-won forced a smile, though his heart was heavy with dread. "I will," he promised, before closing the trapdoor and covering it with the floorboards. He stood up, his hands trembling, and took a deep breath. He had to be strong for Seon, for their son. The door to their home burst open, and a group of soldiers stormed in, their faces hard and unyielding. "Where is the child?" one of them demanded, his voice cold as steel. Jin-won stepped forward, his heart pounding. "We have no son," he lied, his voice steady. "Only a daughter who is away visiting relatives." The soldier narrowed his eyes, studying Jin-won's face for any sign of deceit. "Search the house," he ordered. The soldiers moved quickly, overturning furniture, tearing through cupboards, and ripping apart the bed. Jin-won stood motionless, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. His mind raced with desperate thoughts. If they found the trapdoor, if they heard a single sound from below, it would all be over. Minutes stretched into an eternity as the soldiers searched every corner of the small home. But the trapdoor remained hidden, and Seon remained silent in the darkness, holding her breath, praying that her son would not cry. Finally, the soldier in charge stepped forward, his expression one of frustration. "There's nothing here," he growled, signaling his men to leave. He turned to Jin-won, his eyes cold. "If we find out you've lied to us, you and your entire family will be executed." Jin-won nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He watched as the soldiers left, their heavy footsteps fading into the distance. Only when he was certain they were gone did he rush to the trapdoor, pulling it open with trembling hands. Seon emerged, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Are they gone?" she whispered, clutching their son tightly. Jin-won nodded, tears of relief streaming down his face. "Yes," he whispered, wrapping his arms around his wife and child. "They're gone." But even as they held each other, they knew their relief was temporary. The king's decree had turned their world upside down. They could no longer stay in their village, no longer live the peaceful life they had known. They would have to flee to find a new home far from the reach of the king's soldiers. And so, with heavy hearts and little more than the clothes on their backs, Jinhwan and Suyin set out on a journey that would take them deep into the mountains, to a place where they hoped their son would be safe from the king's wrath. They knew the road ahead would be fraught with danger, but they had no choice. Their son was destined for something far greater than the life they had known, and they would do whatever it took to protect him. Years passed, and the kingdom of Sila was forever changed by the king's decree. The once thriving villages had become ghost towns, their streets eerily silent, the laughter of children replaced by the mournful cries of the bereaved. Fear hung over the land like a shroud, and the king, once loved and revered, was now seen as a tyrant. In the remote mountains, far from the king's reach, a small group of survivors had formed a hidden community. They were families who had managed to escape the king's purge, who had fled their homes in the dead of night, carrying their sons to safety. They lived in secrecy, deep in the forest, where they were protected by the ancient trees and the rugged terrain. It was in this hidden village that the child of prophecy, now named Baekhyun, grew up. He was a boy of 10, with dark, intelligent eyes and a quiet strength that belied his age. His parents, Suyin and Jinhwan, had raised him with love and care, teaching him the ways of the forest, the secrets of survival, and the stories of their people. Baekhyun knew nothing of the prophecy that surrounded his birth, nor of the destiny that awaited him. His life was simple, filled with the daily tasks of gathering food, tending to the animals, and helping the other villagers. But there was a restlessness within him, a sense that he was meant for something more than the life of a simple villager. One day, while exploring the forest, Baekhyun came across an old man sitting by a stream. The man was dressed in tattered robes, his hair long and unkempt, his eyes sharp and piercing. He looked at Baekhyun with a gaze that seemed to see right through him, as if he knew all the secrets of the boy's heart. "Who are you?" Baekhyun asked, curiosity overcoming his caution. The old man smiled, a glint of amusement in his eyes. "I am no one of importance," he replied. "Just an old man who has seen too much of the world." Baekhyun frowned, sensing there was more to the old man than met the eye. "Why are you here?" he asked. "This forest is dangerous for those who do not know its ways." The old man chuckled, his laugh like the rustling of leaves in the wind. "I have been in more dangerous places, young one," he said, "but it is you who have drawn me here. You, who are destined for greatness." Baekhyun's eyes widened in surprise. "Destined for greatness? What do you mean?" The old man's expression grew serious, his eyes narrowing. "There is a prophecy, child, a prophecy that speaks of a boy who will rise to challenge the king and bring about a new era in Silla. You are that boy, Baekhyun. You are the one who will fulfill that prophecy." Baekhyun's heart raced, his mind reeling. He had heard stories of the king's cruelty, of the massacre that had claimed the lives of so many innocent children. But he had never imagined that he, a simple boy from a hidden village, could be the one destined to end the king's reign. "I don't understand," Baekhyun said, his voice trembling. "How can I, just a boy, defeat a king?" The old man's gaze softened, and he placed a hand on Baekhyun's shoulder. "You are more than just a boy, Baekhyun. You have a power within you, a power that you have yet to discover. The blood of the ancient kings runs through your veins, and it is that blood that will give you the strength to fulfill your destiny." Baekhyun shook his head, disbelief warring with a strange sense of truth in the old man's words. "But I'm just a child," he whispered. "How can I stand against the king?" The old man smiled gently. "You will not be alone, Baekhyun. There are those who will stand with you, who will fight by your side. And when the time comes, you will know what to do." With that, the old man rose to his feet, his movement surprisingly fluid for someone of his age. He turned to leave, but paused to look back at Baekhyun one last time. "Remember, Baekhyun," he said softly, "the path ahead will not be easy, but it is your path to walk. Trust in yourself and in the power within you. The fate of the kingdom rests in your hands." And with that, the old man disappeared into the forest, leaving Baekhyun standing by the stream, his heart heavy with the weight of the prophecy. As Baekhyun returned to the village, his mind raced with questions. Who was the old man? How did he know about the prophecy? And most importantly, what was this power that he spoke of? Baekhyun knew that his life had changed in that moment. The world he had known, the life of a simple villager, was no longer his. He had a destiny to fulfill, a prophecy to bring to life. And though the path ahead was shrouded in mystery, Baekhyun knew one thing for certain. He could not turn back. In the days that followed his encounter with the old man, Baekhyun found himself unable to focus on his daily tasks. His mind was consumed with thoughts of the prophecy, of the destiny that had been thrust upon him. He could feel something stirring within him, a power that had lain dormant, now awakening with each passing day. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, casting the forest in a golden glow, Baekhyun decided to return to the stream where he had met the old man. He felt a strange pull, as if something was calling to him, guiding him back to that place. When he arrived, the air was still, the only sound the gentle babbling of the stream. Baekhyun knelt by the water, his reflection staring back at him, and for the first time, he noticed something different. His eyes, once dark and unremarkable, now seemed to shimmer with a faint light, like the glint of sunlight on water. "What is happening to me?" Baekhyun whispered, his voice filled with wonder and fear. As if in response, the air around him began to shimmer, and the water in the stream started to ripple, despite the absence of wind. Baekhyun's heart raced as he felt a surge of energy coursing through his veins, a warmth spreading from his chest to the tips of his fingers. He raised his hand, watching in awe as the water in the stream began to rise, forming a small, swirling vortex. Baekhyun gasped, the realization dawning on him that he was the one controlling it. The power that the old man had spoken of, it was real, and it was within him. But just as quickly as the power had surged, it began to fade, leaving Baekhyun breathless and trembling. The water fell back into the stream with a soft splash, and the shimmering in the air disappeared, leaving the forest quiet once more. Baekhyun stared at his hands, his mind reeling. He had felt the power, had seen it manifest before his eyes, but he had no idea how to control it, how to harness it. "What am I supposed to do?" he murmured, his voice filled with uncertainty. As if in answer, a soft voice drifted through the trees, carried on the wind. "Seek the guardian," it whispered, barely audible. "The guardian will guide you." Baekhyun looked around, but saw no one. The voice seemed to come from nowhere, yet it resonated deep within him, as if it was speaking directly to his soul. "The guardian?" Baekhyun repeated, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Who is the guardian?" The voice did not answer, leaving Baekhyun with more questions than before. But one thing was clear. He needed to find this guardian, whoever or whatever it was. It was the only way he could learn to control the power within him, the power that would allow him to fulfill his destiny. Baekhyun knew that he could not tell his parents about what had happened. They had done everything in their power to protect him, to keep him safe from the king's wrath. If they knew that he was the child of prophecy, the one destined to challenge the king, they would be terrified. So, Baekhyun kept his secret close, determined to find the guardian and learn the truth on his own. He began to venture further into the forest each day, searching for any sign, any clue that might lead him to the guardian. He explored hidden paths, climbed rocky cliffs, and crossed rivers, his determination growing with each passing day. As he wandered the forest, Baekhyun began to notice small changes within himself. His senses grew sharper. He could hear the rustle of leaves from far away, see the tiniest details in the bark of a tree, and feel the presence of animals long before they appeared. His reflexes became quicker, his movements more fluid, as if the forest itself was becoming a part of him. Days turned into weeks, and still, Baekhyun found no trace of the guardian. Frustration gnawed at him, but he refused to give up. He knew that the answer was out there, waiting for him to find it. One afternoon, as Baekhyun was making his way through a dense thicket, he came across a small clearing bathed in sunlight. In the center of the clearing stood a massive, ancient tree, its trunk gnarled and twisted, its roots digging deep into the earth. The tree exuded a sense of power, as if it had stood there for centuries, witnessing the passage of time. Baekhyun felt a strange pull toward the tree, a sense that this place was important. He approached it cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. As he neared the tree, he noticed something carved into its bark, symbols that he did not recognize, yet felt strangely familiar. They seemed to pulse with a faint, golden light, drawing Baekhyun closer. He reached out to touch the symbols, his fingers brushing against the rough bark. The moment he made contact, a wave of energy surged through him, and the ground beneath his feet began to tremble. The symbols glowed brighter, and the tree itself seemed to come alive, its branches swaying as if caught in a strong wind. Baekhyun stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock. But before he could react, the ground at the base of the tree began to split open, revealing a hidden entrance that led deep into the earth. A voice echoed from the depths of the entrance, calm and resonant. "Enter, child of destiny. The time has come." Baekhyun hesitated, fear and excitement battling within him. He knew that this was it. He had found the guardian. The path before him was unknown, filled with danger and uncertainty, but he could not turn back now. Taking a deep breath, Baekhyun stepped forward and descended into the darkness, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The passageway beneath the ancient tree was narrow and steep, the walls lined with roots that twisted and coiled like serpents. Baekhyun's footsteps echoed softly as he descended deeper into the earth, the air growing cooler with each step. A faint, golden light illuminated the path ahead, leading him further into the unknown. After what felt like an eternity, the passageway opened into a vast chamber, the walls and ceiling covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shimmer with a life of their own. In the center of the chamber stood a figure, cloaked in a flowing robe of deep green, their face hidden beneath a hood. The figure radiated an aura of ancient power, a presence that filled the chamber with a sense of awe and reverence. Baekhyun approached cautiously, his heart pounding. "Are you the guardian?" he asked, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. The figure lifted their head, revealing a face that was both youthful and ancient, with eyes that glowed like molten gold. "I am," the guardian replied, their voice calm and resonant. "And you, Baekhyun, are the one I have been waiting for." Baekhyun swallowed hard, trying to steady his nerves. "You know who I am?" The guardian nodded, a faint smile playing on their lips. "I have known of you since before you were born, child of prophecy. The moment you took your first breath, the forces of destiny set into motion a chain of events that have led you here to this very moment." Baekhyun felt a shiver run down his spine. "But why me?" he asked, his voice filled with confusion. "Why was I chosen?" The guardian's gaze softened, and they gestured for Baekhyun to sit beside them. "The reasons are complex, rooted in the very fabric of time and fate. But know this, you were not chosen by chance. You carry within you the blood of the ancient kings, the same blood that once ruled this land with wisdom and justice. That lineage, that power, is what will enable you to fulfill the prophecy." Baekhyun sat down, his mind racing. "But I don't know how to use this power," he admitted. "I don't even understand what it is." The guardian reached out, placing a hand on Baekhyun's shoulder. "The power within you is both a gift and a burden. It is the essence of the ancient kings, a force that can shape the world itself. But it is not something that can be controlled through sheer will alone. To harness it, you must first understand who you are and what it means to carry this power." Baekhyun looked into the guardian's golden eyes, searching for answers. "How do I do that?" The guardian smiled gently. "Through patience, through wisdom, and through the trials that lie ahead. The path to understanding is not an easy one, Baekhyun, but it is a journey you must undertake if you are to fulfill your destiny." Baekhyun nodded slowly, the weight of the guardian's words sinking in. "What do I need to do?" The guardian rose to their feet, their robes rustling softly as they moved. "You must undergo the rite of awakening, a trial that will test your strength, your resolve, and your understanding of the power within you. Only by completing this rite will you unlock the full potential of your lineage and gain the knowledge you need to challenge the king." Baekhyun felt a surge of determination. "I'm ready," he said, his voice firm. The guardian nodded approvingly. "Very well. The rite of awakening consists of 3 trials, each designed to push you to your limits. The first trial is the trial of the mind, where you must confront your deepest fears and doubts. The second trial is the trial of the heart, where you must prove your compassion and your willingness to sacrifice for others. And the third trial is the trial of the spirit, where you will face the true nature of your power and learn to control it." Baekhyun listened intently, his mind racing with anticipation. The trials sounded daunting, but he knew that this was the path he had to take. He could not turn back now. The guardian stepped forward, raising a hand. A soft glow surrounded Baekhyun, and he felt a sense of calm wash over him. "Remember, Baekhyun," the guardian said, their voice filled with wisdom. "The trials are not just about strength or power. They are about understanding who you are and what it means to carry the weight of destiny. Trust in yourself and in the power within you. You are not alone in this journey." With those words, the chamber around Baekhyun began to fade, the walls and carvings dissolving into mist. The last thing he saw was the guardian's golden eyes, filled with a mixture of hope and sorrow. And then, everything went dark. When Baekhyun opened his eyes, he found himself standing in a vast, barren landscape. The sky above was a deep, swirling mass of storm clouds, and the ground beneath his feet was cracked and dry. In the distance, he could see a massive, looming shadow, its form shifting and changing with each passing moment. This was the first trial, the trial of the mind, and Baekhyun knew that whatever he faced here would test him in ways he had never imagined. Taking a deep breath, Baekhyun began to walk forward, ready to face whatever challenges awaited him. The barren landscape stretched out before Baekhyun, desolate and unforgiving. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding, and the ground beneath his feet seemed to shift with each step, as if it were alive. The massive shadow in the distance loomed closer, its form becoming more defined, yet still elusive, as if it were made of smoke and darkness. Baekhyun's heart pounded in his chest as he continued to walk forward, each step heavy with the weight of uncertainty. He could feel the tension in the air, the sense that something was watching him, waiting for him to make a move. Suddenly, the ground beneath Baekhyun's feet began to tremble, and the shadow in the distance started to take shape. It grew larger and larger until it towered over him, a monstrous figure of darkness and fear. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and its mouth twisted into a cruel grin. Baekhyun froze, his body tense with fear. The creature was unlike anything he had ever seen. A being of pure darkness, its form constantly shifting and changing. It was as if the shadow itself had come to life, taking on the shape of Baekhyun's deepest fears. "Who are you?" Baekhyun called out, his voice trembling. The creature's grin widened, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. "I am your fear," it hissed, its voice a low, menacing growl. "I am the darkness within you, the doubt that gnaws at your soul. I am the part of you that you try to hide, the part that you fear the most." Baekhyun took a step back, his mind racing. This was the trial of the mind, the first of the 3 trials. He had to confront his fears, face the darkness within him, and overcome it. The creature lunged at Baekhyun, its massive claws reaching for him. Baekhyun instinctively raised his hands, summoning the power within him. A burst of light erupted from his palms, striking the creature and causing it to recoil with a roar of pain. But the creature quickly recovered, its form shifting and changing as it prepared to attack again. Baekhyun knew that he couldn't rely solely on his power to defeat this foe. This was a battle of the mind, and he had to find a way to conquer his fear. As the creature lunged at him again, Baekhyun closed his eyes and focused on his breathing. He had to remain calm, to push the fear aside and think clearly. He remembered the guardian's words. The trials were about understanding who he was and what it meant to carry the weight of destiny. Baekhyun opened his eyes, and this time, he didn't try to fight the creature with his power. Instead, he stood his ground, facing the creature head-on. "I'm not afraid of you," he said, his voice steady. The creature paused, its glowing eyes narrowing. "You lie," it hissed. "You are afraid. You are weak." Baekhyun shook his head. "No," he replied. "I am not weak. I am stronger than you, because I have the power to face my fears, to confront the darkness within me. You are a part of me, but you do not control me." The creature snarled, but Baekhyun could see it wavering, its form flickering as if it were losing its grip on reality. "I am not afraid," Baekhyun repeated, his voice growing stronger. "I will not let fear control me." With those words, the creature let out a final, agonized roar before dissolving into a cloud of smoke and shadows. The darkness lifted, and the landscape around Baekhyun began to change. The barren, desolate ground transformed into a lush, green meadow, the storm clouds overhead dissipating to reveal a clear, blue sky. Baekhyun took a deep breath, relief washing over him. He had passed the first trial, the trial of the mind. He had faced his fears and emerged victorious. But he knew that the journey was far from over. 2 more trials awaited him, and each one would be more challenging than the last. As Baekhyun looked around the now peaceful meadow, a sense of calm settled over him. He had proven to himself that he could face his fears, that he could overcome the darkness within him. And with that knowledge, he felt a renewed sense of determination. He would not give up. He would continue on this path, no matter how difficult it became. He was the child of prophecy, the one destined to challenge the king and bring about a new era in Sila. And he would see that destiny fulfilled. With a final glance at the meadow, Baekhyun took a deep breath and prepared himself for the next trial. The serene meadow faded away, replaced by a new landscape, a dense forest bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the sound of birdsong filled the air. It was a place of peace and tranquility, a stark contrast to the barren wasteland of the first trial. But Baekhyun knew that this peaceful scene was deceptive. The second trial, the trial of the heart, was about to begin, and he had no idea what to expect. As he walked through the forest, Baekhyun's thoughts turned to his family, his mother, Seon, and his father, Jinwon. They had sacrificed so much to protect him, to keep him safe from the king's decree. And now, he was on a journey that could change the fate of the entire kingdom. He wondered if they knew what he was doing, if they could feel the burden of his destiny as deeply as he did. Lost in thought, Baekhyun nearly missed the sound of a soft cry coming from nearby. He paused, listening intently. The cry came again, faint but unmistakable, a child's voice, filled with fear. Baekhyun's heart raced as he followed the sound, his instincts urging him to hurry. He pushed through the underbrush, his breath coming in short, quick bursts. Finally, he emerged into a small clearing, where he found a young girl huddled beneath a tree, her face streaked with tears. "Are you okay?" Baekhyun asked gently as he approached her. The girl looked up, her eyes wide with fear. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old, with long, tangled hair and a dirt-smudged face. "I'm lost," she whimpered. "I can't find my way home." Baekhyun's heart went out to the girl. He knelt beside her, offering a reassuring smile. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'll help you find your way home." The girl looked up at him, her eyes filled with hope. "Really?" Baekhyun nodded. "Of course. You're not alone anymore." The girl hesitated, then threw her arms around Baekhyun, clinging to him as if he were her lifeline. Baekhyun gently patted her back, his heart swelling with a mixture of compassion and determination. As they began to walk together through the forest, Baekhyun kept an eye out for any signs of danger. The girl was quiet, her small hand clutching his tightly. He could feel her trembling, and he did his best to comfort her, speaking to her in a soothing voice. They walked for what felt like hours, the sun dipping lower in the sky. Baekhyun knew they needed to find shelter soon, but he was determined to keep the girl safe. She reminded him of his own little sister, who had died when he was very young. He hadn't been able to save her, but he could save this girl. As they continued, Baekhyun began to notice strange things about the forest. The trees seemed to close in around them, their branches reaching out like claws. The air grew colder, and the shadows lengthened, creating an eerie atmosphere. Baekhyun's instincts told him that something was wrong, but he couldn't pinpoint what it was. Finally, they reached a small cave, and Baekhyun decided to take shelter there for the night. He gathered some dry leaves and branches to make a small fire, using his power to ignite it. The warm light flickered against the cave walls, providing some comfort in the darkness. The girl sat close to the fire, her eyes reflecting the flames. She hadn't spoken much since they left the clearing, and Baekhyun could sense that something was troubling her. "Are you okay?" he asked, sitting down beside her. The girl looked up at him, her expression sad. "I miss my family," she whispered. "I want to go home." Baekhyun's heart ached for her. "We'll find your home," he promised. "But for now, let's get some rest. We'll continue searching in the morning." The girl nodded, curling up beside the fire. Baekhyun draped his cloak over her to keep her warm, then settled down a short distance away, keeping watch over her. As the night wore on, Baekhyun found it difficult to sleep. The forest was quiet, too quiet, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He kept his senses alert, listening for any signs of danger. Suddenly, the girl's voice broke the silence. "Baekhyun," she whispered. Baekhyun turned to her, surprised that she knew his name. "Yes." The girl sat up, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "Do you really think you can save me?" she asked, her voice taking on a haunting tone. Baekhyun's blood ran cold. This was no ordinary child. This was part of the trial, a test of his compassion and his willingness to sacrifice. "I will do everything I can to save you," Baekhyun replied, his voice steady. "I promise to protect you, and I won't go back on that promise." The girl's expression shifted, and she smiled sadly. "You can't save everyone, Baekhyun. Sometimes, no matter how hard you try, it's not enough." Baekhyun's heart sank as he realized the truth of her words. The girl was a manifestation of his own guilt and regret, a reminder of the people he had lost, the lives he couldn't save. "But that doesn't mean I should stop trying," Baekhyun said firmly. "I may not be able to save everyone, but I will always do my best to protect those I can." The girl's glowing eyes softened, and she reached out to touch Baekhyun's hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on me." With those words, the girl's form began to fade, dissolving into a soft, golden light. The cave and the forest around them blurred and shifted, and Baekhyun found himself standing once again in the vast chamber beneath the ancient tree. The guardian was waiting for him, their golden eyes filled with approval. "You have passed the trial of the heart," they said, their voice warm. "You have shown that you are willing to sacrifice for others, even in the face of your own pain and loss." Baekhyun felt a sense of relief and pride, but also a lingering sadness. The trial had reminded him of the weight of his responsibilities, the burden of being the child of prophecy. But he knew he couldn't dwell on that. There was still one more trial to face, the trial of the spirit, and he would face it with everything he had. Baekhyun set off towards the horizon, his heart filled with hope and determination. The future was uncertain, but he knew one thing for sure. He would not rest until his destiny was fulfilled and Sila was free. Baekhyun's journey back to the capital of Sila was filled with purpose and anticipation. He had faced the trials, conquered his fears, and mastered the power within him. Now, it was time to confront the king who had brought so much suffering to his people. The sun was setting as Baekhyun approached the gates of the capital, casting long shadows over the ancient city. The streets were eerily quiet as he walked through them, his cloak pulled tightly around him. The once bustling marketplace was deserted, the stalls empty and abandoned. The people of Sila were living in fear under the king's tyrannical rule, and Baekhyun could feel the weight of their despair pressing down on him. As he made his way toward the palace, Baekhyun's thoughts turned to his parents, Seon and Jinwon. He had left them behind to embark on this journey, and he wondered if they were safe. The king's decree had brought untold pain to so many families, and Baekhyun knew that his own family had not been spared. But he could not dwell on that now. He had a mission to complete, a destiny to fulfill. The time for fear and doubt was over. When Baekhyun reached the palace gates, he found them heavily guarded. The king's soldiers, clad in black armor, stood watch, their faces expressionless. Baekhyun took a deep breath, summoning the power within him, and stepped forward. "I am Baekhyun," he called out, his voice steady and clear. "I am here to challenge the king." The guards exchanged glances, their eyes narrowing in suspicion. But before they could react, a powerful force surged from Baekhyun's outstretched hand, sending a shockwave through the air. The gates groaned and then burst open, the soldiers thrown back by the sheer force of Baekhyun's power. Without hesitation, Baekhyun entered the palace, his heart pounding with a mixture of determination and anticipation. The halls were dimly lit, the air heavy with the scent of incense. He moved swiftly, his footsteps echoing off the marble floors as he made his way to the throne room. When he finally reached the grand doors of the throne room, Baekhyun paused, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. He knew that the final confrontation with the king would not be easy, but he was ready. He had come too far to turn back now. With a deep breath, Baekhyun pushed open the doors and stepped into the throne room. The king sat on his throne at the far end of the room, his face obscured by shadows. He was an imposing figure, his presence radiating authority and malice. Baekhyun could feel the king's gaze on him, cold and calculating. "So, the child of prophecy has finally come," the king said, his voice a low, menacing growl. "I knew this day would come, but I did not expect it to be so soon." Baekhyun stood tall, meeting the king's gaze with unwavering resolve. "Your reign of terror ends today," he declared. "I will not allow you to continue to bring suffering to the people of Sila." The king laughed, a harsh, cruel sound that echoed through the chamber. "You think you can stop me? You are nothing but a child, playing with powers you do not understand." But Baekhyun was undeterred. "I understand my power well enough," he replied, "and I know that it is my destiny to stop you." The king rose from his throne, his dark robes billowing around him as he descended the steps. "Then come, child of prophecy," he sneered. "Show me the power that you believe will be enough to defeat me." Baekhyun's heart raced as the king's words echoed in his mind. This was it, the final battle. He could feel the power within him surging, ready to be unleashed. With a determined expression, Baekhyun stepped forward, his hands glowing with the energy he had learned to control. The king raised his own hands, and a dark energy began to swirl around him, filling the room with a malevolent force. The air crackled with tension as the two opponents faced each other, the fate of the kingdom hanging in the balance. For a moment, there was silence, a tense, heavy silence that seemed to stretch on forever. And then, with a roar of power, the king unleashed a blast of dark energy toward Baekhyun. Baekhyun reacted instantly, raising his hands and summoning a barrier of light to protect himself. The two forces clashed in midair, sending shockwaves through the room. The walls trembled, and the floor cracked under the strain of their combined power. But Baekhyun did not falter. He could feel the strength of his power growing, pushing back against the king's darkness. He knew that he had to stay focused, to control his power, and use it to its fullest potential. With a determined cry, Baekhyun unleashed a powerful blast of light, driving the king back. The dark energy wavered, and the king's expression twisted with anger and frustration. "You are strong," the king admitted, his voice filled with venom. "But you are not strong enough." The king's dark energy surged once more, threatening to overwhelm Baekhyun. But Baekhyun refused to give in. He could feel the power within him, the legacy of his ancestors, and he knew that he had the strength to overcome the darkness. Summoning all of his power, Baekhyun unleashed a final, devastating blast of light. The energy tore through the throne room, shattering the king's dark energy and sending him crashing to the ground. For a moment, there was silence, an eerie, still silence that hung in the air like a heavy fog. And then, slowly, the king began to rise, his body trembling with the effort. But it was clear that he had been defeated. Baekhyun stood over the fallen king, his chest heaving with exertion. He had done it. He had defeated the tyrant who had brought so much pain and suffering to Sila. The king looked up at Baekhyun, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hatred. "You may have won this battle," he hissed, "but you will never be able to rule. The people will never accept you." Baekhyun met the king's gaze with a steady, unwavering stare. "I do not seek power for myself," he said quietly. "I seek to bring peace and justice to Sila, and I will do whatever it takes to ensure that the people are free from tyranny." With those words, Baekhyun turned away from the fallen king, his mind already focused on the task ahead. There was much work to be done, and he knew that the road to rebuilding Sila would be long and difficult. But he was ready for the challenge. As Baekhyun walked out of the throne room, the first rays of dawn began to break through the windows, casting a warm, golden light over the palace. It was a new day, a new beginning for Sila, a kingdom that had been freed from the grip of darkness. The news of the king's defeat spread quickly throughout Sila, and the people rejoiced. The tyrant who had ruled over them with an iron fist was gone, and a new era of hope and peace had begun. Baekhyun was hailed as a hero, the savior of the kingdom, but he remained humble, knowing that his journey was far from over. But Baekhyun knew that true peace could only be achieved if the people were united in their purpose. He traveled throughout the kingdom, meeting with villagers, farmers, and artisans, listening to their concerns and working with them to find solutions. His humility and dedication earned him the respect and admiration of all, and he became a symbol of hope and strength for the people of Sila. Baekhyun's legacy grew. The child of prophecy had fulfilled his destiny, not through violence or conquest, but through compassion, wisdom, and the unwavering belief in a better future. Sila had been transformed from a kingdom ruled by fear to a land of peace and prosperity.